We'll now go into public session. Bhualam fáilte a chur roimh gacha le gine as teachtain seo inniu agus míle buchas as an taras dhéanamh is teachtaí teach line. I'd like to welcome everybody from the Department of Culture, Heritage and Gaeltacht. Mr. Fergal O'Quigley, Assistant Secretary, Ms. Tanya Bonatti, Creative Ireland Programme Director, and Ms. Sinead Copeland. I'd also like to welcome from the Department of Education and Skills, Mr. Eamon Moran and Mr. Daniel Cairns, who will respond to the appropriate questions arising. But before we start, there's a little bit of business that I have to deal with. I want to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2)(l of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in relation to the evidence to this committee. However, if you're directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to qualified privilege in respect to your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. I also wish to advise you that the opening statement and any other documents that you submit to the committee will be or may be published on the committee website after this meeting. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that you should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Okay, so chun tús a dhéanamh don córa, tugamid curanis don Ryan Culture, Oireachtas agus Gaeltacht a chur láthair a dhéanamh. So we'll ask the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht to make its presentation, please.
Good morning, Chairley. Bhualam dúsma wíhes a choraniúil an chiste as deise hortung aniu bheith láthair chun lorslib faoi chlár Heydonach, muoinú an chlár agus an dul chun cinenne tá déantach an gcadí seo. My name is Fergal O'Quigley, Assistant Secretary for the Culture Division of the Department, which includes the Creative Ireland Programme. I'm accompanied by Tanya Bonatti, Director of the Programme, and Sinead Copeland, Principal Officer. I'm also accompanied by Eamon Moran and Daniel Cairns from the Department of Education and Skills. That department is a key partner in the programme. I will make some introductory comments and then hand over to my colleague Tanya. The Creative Ireland Programme is a 5-year all-of-government culture-based initiative that emphasises the importance of human creativity for the individual, community and national well-being. That is, but what does the programme actually do? Led from within the Department of Culture, Heritage and Gaeltacht, the programme is fundamentally a collaborative effort involving government departments, government and non-government agencies, local government, voluntary groups as well as academic and cultural organisations to develop, encourage and facilitate initiatives and policies that enable participation in creative activity at all stages of life. The job of the programme is not to duplicate the work of the Arts Council or the Heritage Council or any other body, but to work together across various policy areas to bring innovation and coordination to a range of important initiatives, ultimately serving the citizens in a better way. Bodies such as the Arts Council and the Heritage Council and local authorities are important partners, particularly in the rollout of the creative schools and community-based initiatives. Tanya, who took up her role as the Director of the programme in June, will give you a short overview of progress across some of the key initiatives of the Creative Ireland programme, particularly as we head towards the end of the second year of the programme. 2017, the first year, presented a learning opportunity for the Department to build new relationships and explore new policy areas, and we initiated a number of really important initiatives. In 2018, with an allocation of €6 million, we are progressing these initiatives and adding to them. We are starting to really embed important strategic relationships right across government and looking to the longer-term impact of some of the work of the programme. It should be noted that a further allocation of €1.15 million has been provided for the programme in 2019 to bring funding up to €7.15 million in a full year. I should also point out that in relation to the funding, the Department is anxious to ensure maximum transparency and publishes a detailed breakdown under all funding heads on the Department's website. We have circulated a document giving detail of this year's expenditure of the committee in advance of the meeting. I will now hand over to Tanya.
Thank you very much. I'll take the committee through some of the key areas of the Creative Ireland's programme of work. Cultural and creative education is one area where we're working together, and it's so important in really having an impact. I think it's potentially the most transformative part of Creative Ireland's work. Under Pillar 1, which is known as Creative Youth, a plan to enable the creative potential of every child and young person, which we launched in December of last year, this brings together a number of government departments, most critically the Department of Education, but also the Department of Children and indeed the Arts Council. So we have a very close working relationship, meeting monthly, all working together to deliver Pillar 1 of this programme. It sets out very specific goals within the Creative Ireland programme to ensure that every child in Ireland has practical access to tuition and participation in music, drama, art and coding by 2022. So we committed over 2 million in 2018 to the programme, and we're developing a number of pilots this year. And I suppose we've been given the scope to see which of those pilots is most successful and could be mainstreamed. Probably our most flagship initiative is the 150 creative schools that were recently announced. Nearly 10% of all schools in the country put their hand up and said they wished to be known as a creative school and to take part in the programme. We've recruited 50 creative associates and teachers, and we've given them some training, and they're now fanning out to these 150 schools with the idea that they will work with the children, the teachers and the school principal to develop a creative plan bespoke for that school. So each school will themselves identify areas they want to work in. It could be a particular art form, so we would imagine that perhaps a school in the inner city of Dublin might choose a different art form than one in Donegal, but that's up to the school themselves. And we will also look at working with particular national organisations that have a programme for children in schools, like Poetry Ireland, the Film Institute, as well as we've invested in considerable sums in CPD for teachers. 68 schools were also recently announced as part of a Creative Clusters programme, which my colleague Eamon can talk to you about. Clusters is a particular initiative of the Department of Education. There's a creative cluster, but there's also digital clusters and DASH clusters. The idea is that we will get schools between 2 and 5 schools working together to use art and creativity to address shared challenges and to achieve better learning outcomes. And each of these clusters has a small budget of about €2,500 to spend on that particular project in a school year. We will shortly see the outcome of the Creative Youth Partnerships process. Applications have just been submitted. This aims to establish networks, but in this instance they'll be led by the education and training boards. They will foster real collaboration amongst local creative youth service providers, and we're hoping that it will bring about an improved use of existing resources and practices in each of the ETB areas. We're envisaging that 3 ETBs will be in the pilot phase, which will be announced before Christmas. We're also building on CPD for teachers across both primary and post-primary levels, and we're looking at developing early year CPD, all of which serve to truly embed creative practices in school settings. And we certainly intend to continue to build on that in future years. The second area of progress, and really a significant expenditure for Creative Ireland, is the Creative Communities pillar, Pillar 2. In 2017, our department allocated €1 million to 31 local authorities, and the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government allocated an additional $1 million. All of this allowed us to establish cross-sectoral culture teams, and there is a Creative Ireland coordinator in every local authority. Our department doubled this funding in 2018, and with the Department of Housing's €1 million, it has allowed us to really increase activity and capacity building in local communities. So we have more than 500 initiatives, and it ranges from restoring of ships, intergenerational choirs, social farms for people with intellectual disabilities where farming and the arts works together. It really is up to the local community to decide how they wish to spend that money. And again, we want to build and sustain on this over the coming years. It should be said that this work is really building on significant investment that has happened already. As you are aware, the Arts Council and the Heritage Council, together with the Department of Rural and Community Development, are already funding initiatives. But the secret sauce of us is about that cross-sectoral working. This is the real value of the programme. We're bringing together librarians, heritage officers, arts officers, the local enterprise, conservation officers if they exist, working in a team where traditionally they might have been a bit siloed. One example from Creative Ireland in Cavan is the funding of a new award-winning Cavan playwright, Philip Doherty, and the wonderful Erin Monaghan from Druid Theatre Company, and this will allow two of Cavan's finest artists to work together for the first time. Creative Ireland in Kerry has funded a number of different initiatives, including the development of creative hubs and creative incubation spaces in key locations across County Kerry. That's currently being researched, as is the possibility of film in the County of Kerry, and how, together with the Kerry Education and Training Board, the skill set of the county in relation to film production could be explored. These long-term strategic projects run alongside events that might have been happening already, but which, with Creative Ireland funding, they're able to expand, like the Sliabh Luachra Music Trail and the Creative Ireland Kerry Grant Scheme. This year saw the rollout of the first ever Crinne na nÓg, a National Day of Creativity for Children and Young People. We understand that Ireland is one of the only countries in the world to have such an event. Approximately €800,000 was allocated to the rollout, with each local authority receiving €10,000 to develop a specific programme of creative activity for children and young people in their communities, which would have an expression on that one day in June. Dublin City Council was allocated €350,000, which was put through Dublin's Culture Connects, a company associated with Dublin City Council, to run a number of initiatives within Dublin. 500 events took place across the country, and we had a successful media campaign in partnership with RTE and others to ensure that as much information was available as possible if you wanted to get involved. We curated some special content for our social media channels, including short videos where some of the children who were involved in the run-up to the project, we filmed them making their projects to encourage other children and young people to get involved. We also built a special website to allow people to search for events that were happening in their local towns and villages. They could search by the child's age or by the location they were in. We worked with the Department of Children and Youth Affairs to ensure that children were consulted in this process, bringing together a group of children of primary school age and of post-primary age to ask them, what would a day of creativity or a children's creative festival look like to you? And their thinking informed the rollout of the programme in 2018. We're currently looking at ways to improve this event even more for next year, and we're working with our Creative Ireland coordinators in the 31 local authorities on this process. This year we also launched a special Creative Ireland programme scheme, which has now been called the National Creativity Fund. This allows innovative projects which have the potential to inform future government policy and the potential to scale up to apply for funding on a pilot basis. We had a fantastic response with 287 applications. An independent panel of 9 people assessed those applications from a variety of arts and heritage and other backgrounds, rural development. And 30 projects were allocated to run over 2018-2019. We have put in place robust service level agreements with all these new projects, and we're hoping to work with them to support them, and probably more importantly to learn from them, feeding into wider government policy. So 1.2 million has been allocated to these projects, with the majority of that funding happening in 2019. Communicating what we do is important because we want people to understand the importance of culture and creativity in the arts, and we want to build audiences, and we want to increase the opportunity for people to engage, particularly at a community level. And that's why we invest in a good quality communications programme, in a website. We currently have shot some films of some of the beneficiaries in local communities from Carlow to Cork at the moment, and so we've made a number of short films about what we do. We want to use these platforms to access as many people as possible and to widen the access to creative and cultural experiences for as many people as possible. We engage with national and regional print and media to develop high quality resource material and information, and more people are accessing us through our social channels. So we did a large conference in Dublin Castle in December 2017, and we had 12,500 people follow us as we live streamed that event for people who couldn't get to it. I can assure this committee that we will continue to monitor this to ensure value for money and impact. A full breakdown of all costs associated with the Creative Ireland programme in 2017 was published online and sent to this committee at the start of the year, and was also forwarded to you yesterday, and we plan to do exactly the same at the end of this year. And we believe the Creative Ireland programme presents opportunities across all areas of government, and we look forward to progressing this over the coming years. Thank you.
Míle buíochas as an Carl Ítach Simulshin. Fair play. Okay, well, I understand we're not going to have a presentation from yourselves, but you're open for questions, Eamon and Daniel, if that's okay. Okay, does anybody want to start off the questioning? I might start then if there's no takers just at the moment.
There's plenty of takers, but we'd like to go first, Chair.
Okay, fair play. I suppose the issue of citizen engagement is important, and you've given a good... But first of all, can I say congratulations on your new role, and I wish you luck within it. It's obviously an opportunity, a great opportunity for yourself, but also for the sector too. The issue of citizen engagement is important, and I noticed that it's one of the larger investment levels from yourselves. Now, obviously, there is engagement for the purpose, as you have laid out, but there's also engagement for the purpose of a government engaging with the state, and there was a worry maybe at the start that that engagement could be used for the purposes of, let's say, promoting government activities rather than the development of the sector. And maybe if you could tend to that question. I'm going to ask a couple of questions together. So, also, one of the other concerns that existed in the early days of your organisation was the fact that it was a new funding model. So people really asked the question, what was it for? Why do we have another arts funding model when we have the Arts Council, which has a very clear arm's length distribution of funds around the country from the state? So maybe if you could talk to your funding model and how we make sure that that is, one, perfectly safe with regards funds being delivered and not being influenced by the state, and two, being accessible to real artists on the ground who need funds. Because we know that, I think since 2013 there's actually been a fall in incomes of arts people around the country, even though the economy has increased a little bit. The other issue that's, and I don't think that the word is mentioned in either presentation, and it struck me that we're in the closing stages of Bliain na Gaeilge, and that's, you know, the Irish language is probably one of the most important cultural elements of the country. By far, it's probably our most unique element of culture, and I just wanted to see what role the Irish language is playing within Culture Ireland, you know, from this committee's perspective, but from my perspective anyways, is the Irish language is often either seen as an afterthought or is often relegated to particular organisations rather than washed through the whole experience of every single state organisation. So maybe if we could look at those questions first, and we'll take it from there.
Chairman, maybe I'll commence in fairness to Tanya, who joined us in June. I think some of those issues particularly go back to the origins of the programme, and I think it's interesting to look to see where the origins of the programme really came out of. Well, two things: our overall cultural policy, which we were developing at the time, and which, you know, the committee has been helpful in that regard to, and the Ireland 2016 Centenary Programme, where the Department led a cross-government programme whereby, working with agencies across the state, with the Arts Council, with government departments, and particularly with local authorities, we were able to bring a huge amount of national pride. And then when we were looking back to say, well, why did that work? Part of it was the cross-cutting nature, part of it was the engagement on the ground and the work by local authorities. So I think there was a feeling that we needed to build on that, and that's the basic structure that underpinned the Creative Ireland programme. In relation to engagement, absolutely the focus of engagement must be on the programme. It's not advertising government as such, it's advertising and promoting culture and creativity at the local level. And I think if you look at the figures, there's been a significant shift in terms of the first year cost of the programme, where there was a significant cost in developing new websites, new digital interfaces, as well as very upfront engagement. And that has been reduced significantly in the second year as we move to programme. And I think Tanya might be able to talk about some of those programme issues. The funding model and the arm's length principle. I met the National Campaign for the Arts recently, actually, and we were talking about the arm's length principle, and I said, do you know one of the issues with the arm's length principle is that people say, do you respect the arm's length principle? And you say, of course we do, and then the conversation ends. And I said, actually, we need to talk about the arm's length principle because sometimes that gets in the way of working together. So, for example, the department hasn't had a history in the past of working with the Arts Council, with the Department of Education. In fact, the Department of Education and the Arts Council wouldn't be able to work together in delivering the Creative Schools programme if it wasn't for the glue provided by the Department of Culture in it, using our role as a government department to bring everything together. That's collaboration. That's not getting in the way of the arm's length principle of the Arts Council. We're not making choices as to whether artist X or artist Y should be supported. We're not determining whether what artists can say. That's not a space we can get into. So I think in terms of when we talk about the arm's length principle, we need to kind of engage as to really what do we mean about it, so as not to create artificial barriers that prevents us all working together. As Tanya very rightly pointed out, the difference between directing funding through the Arts Council solely and the way we are providing a small amount of funding through the Creative Ireland programme is that issue of collaboration. The Arts Council is very much about promoting the professional arts in Ireland, and rightfully so. The Heritage Council is about promoting interest in our heritage. But we found it in the Ireland 2016 programme, that for the first time it was often the case that in the first time at local authority level that librarians, archivists, arts officers and heritage officers actually work together. And that's a huge amount of creative energy and cultural energy that we were all missing. And that was really core point of the programme, was to ensure that we put in place these culture teams so that wouldn't happen in the past. And that's been very successful. And the Arts Council alone couldn't do that, or the Heritage Council alone couldn't do that. Whereas we in the department, with the broader responsibility for engaging in our culture, we're able to bring those partners together. And I think that's why it's different. But it's not getting into trying to, promote what particular people would say or not say.
I would probably say, Ciara, we're not funding, the Creative Ireland programme head office is not funding artists. We are not a quango. So where we're, as Fergus said, ultimately the money that we give to the local authorities, you can see, you asked for example about Blina Gaeltacht. Could I draw your attention to page 13 of the submission we gave you? About a third of our budget goes to the creative communities piece, which is via the local authorities. The local authorities may decide that they wish to do something under Blina Gaeltacht around the Irish language. They may decide they want to do something around the arts or heritage or the libraries programme, or indeed, I'm thinking of something that featured in the Irish Independent last week, an initiative in County Kildare where the 500 people who go out and measure the weather every day for Met Éireann are involved in an arts project, so it brought together environmentalism and the arts. We do not decide if it is the artist that gets that funding. Ultimately, it's the local authority and the team that we have that decide what they need in their local community. So perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. We're not in the business, as the Arts Council is, of funding professional artists. The only exception to that is under the National Creativity Fund. Certain arts organisations have come where they're doing something quite innovative. So, for example, the Gaeltacht University Group in Galway wants to develop a project across 7 hospitals, which has never been done in Ireland, around the arts and health. The amount of funding that the Arts Council has is specifically restricted to the artist fees, but there's something missing where we're thinking, how could we look at that project and get the arts and health to work together better? So the best way I can describe it to you, Deputy, is that we're more like a lubricant, in the sense that we're bringing bringing different government departments to the table. And I might ask Eamon to talk about the new relationship that we have with the Arts Council for Creative Schools, because your concern seems to be that we are replacing the Arts Council. In fact, that isn't the case. The Arts Council is our implementing partner for creative schools. So the Department of Culture and the Department of Education have given the Arts Council approximately €1 million all in for the first pilot project of creative schools, recognising the Arts Council's expertise in terms of arts-rich schools. They are the best implementing partner for this. So I hope that kind of explains that we're not, as I say, in the business of funding artists. Where we are is in the business of projects that kind of fall between two stools. At the national level, might be funded as pilots under the National Creativity Fund, and at local authority level, it is in fact the culture teams at the local level that decide what gets funding.
Okay, good, Margaret.
Eamon, you might
certainly,
just
Tanya,
talk about
thanks
the
a lot.
Arts Council.
And thank you, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the committee about Creative Ireland. I might say from the outset, because we didn't make an opening statement, that our department is delighted to be involved in the Creative Ireland programme. Our particular focus is in relation to the pillar 1 of the programme, which is Creative Youth, where there are, as was indicated earlier, there's about 19 actions being initiated under the Creative Youth pillar, and our department has effective lead responsibility in relation to about 10 of those actions, which I can speak about at greater length later on. And a number of those actions involve our schools, and you know we have about 4,000 schools in the system, about 3,200 primary schools and about 800 post-primary schools, and there are also some youth reach centres involved as well. And the schools...
Is there a telephone on just in your environment there? It seems to be interfering with the fair play. Thank you.
Okay. So the schools that are involved in the project include primary and post-primary schools and some special schools and some youth reach centres. And we're working with a number of hundreds of those schools across the various actions. I suppose the point I'd make from the outset is, because it's a point that we're very clearly aware of, anyone who has children or nephews or nieces in schools, particularly primary schools, will know that all schools would regard themselves as creative schools anyway. And they weren't waiting for Creative Ireland to come along to become creative schools. But we see the benefit of Creative Ireland as allowing, through cooperation between government departments and the Arts Council and other bodies, to try to identify innovative ways to assist schools and students, both in and out of school, to become creative, to identify best practice, and essentially for the Creative Ireland programme to provide an initiative for those schools that are already creative to sort of enhance the element of creativity that they offer to their students, and then maybe in relation to those schools that might have more of a focus, we'll say, on sports or whatever, to actually sort of get involved in the whole creative area also. So we see it as a great opportunity for our schools to get involved. On the Creative Schools initiative, which Tanya mentioned, which has been led by the Arts Council, there's about 150 schools taking part in the first phase of Creative Schools, and the aim is that number will double for the next phase of the programme. For all of these 19 initiatives under Pillar 1, we're essentially in what we call the pilot phase, in that, as somebody else at another meeting suggested, we're trying out a load of initiatives here in schools, and they're very receptive to helping us to try them out. But 150 schools in the Creative Schools project, in addition to receiving support from dedicated teachers and artist facilitators, they receive about €2,000 as a sort of seed funding to help them to put their creative school plan in place. And reflecting the general number spread between primary and post-primary schools, of the 150 schools participating in the first phase, 110 are primary schools, and 30 of those are DESH schools under the Disadvantaged Areas scheme, and 30 are post-primary schools. 8 of them are DESH schools. We have 7 special schools, and we have 3 youth reach centres. and schools from every county are participating. Tanya referred to, and Fergal referred to the close cooperation between our department and the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht, and the Department of Children and Youth Affairs and the Arts Council in the various initiatives. In Creative Schools, for example, we have seconded 2 teachers, a primary and a post-primary teacher, to the Arts Council, who work very, very closely with ourselves and with the Arts Council, and they bring, we'll say, a teaching pedagogical perspective to the project, and that particular initiative is working very, very well. As Tanya indicated, it's in terms of numbers, it's probably the flagship action in creative youth, and certainly it has attracted a great deal of interest from schools. So I'm happy to provide further information on the other actions, but that's just a thumbnail in relation to the creative schools action.
Okay, Gerby Margaret Fishin, and just to finish on one point, I do appreciate the importance of coordination in all of this, and that, you know, it's a common complaint here is that often different departments and different organisations work as silos, and there is massive energy in collaboration, there's no doubt about that. But just to draw the point back to the Irish language, I think I'm just looking at the funding allocated to different genres, and the Irish language gets 79,000 out of 2 million euros, which is about 3%. And what I do understand, obviously, you're not looking to be prescriptive in many cases around what's achieved through certain funding and through certain organisations. The state has a 20-year strategy for the Irish language, because the Irish language is in 1 or 2 generations of dying as a community language, and that would be a shocking shame. And as a result, I do think that there needs to be a coordination element as well, ensuring that, you know, it's just part of the normal funding and development in all aspects of the department as well.
Well, Ciarán, I would also add that this is one part of it. I mean, separately, both the department directly supports Ailín na Gaeltacht, and through the Creative Ireland Fund, Ailín na Gaeltacht have asked us to help them develop an Irish language strategy for drama, which we are funding under the National Creativity Fund. So it's not listed here under the communities. That's that kind of piece where nobody was quite doing it, but we felt if we gave them that bit of support, that we could lift it up. So I take your point that there could be more Irish language, but at the end of the day, we either believe in partnership, in which case it's the local authorities who decide what they want to do, or we don't. And it is the local authorities who have decided the allocation between Billy na Gaeilge and other pillars of our activity.
Deputy Michael Collins.
Yes, indeed, I'll be brief. First of all, thanks for your presentation. Thanks for being here before us today. About the Creative Ireland Grant scheme, you know, I suppose coming from a very rural peninsula, coming myself from the rural peninsula, a rural constituency also, I worry about, you know, how accessible funding like this is to rural communities. You know, how accessible it is, because I've often found, and we saw last week ourselves in Sherkin Island, you know, under the arts programme, I think they get 60,000 they get, and they can deliver a massive graduation programme there down through the years. So you give you give so little, maybe sometimes the communities, they can deliver quite a lot, just a little, and it is very important, I think, that we look at that going forward, that your creative arts grant scheme, that it is accessible to communities, and a lot of communities unfortunately fall between 2 stools, are off the radar with the local authority, but they might be active on the ground. They might need a little bit of help in filling applications and whatever, and mightn't be aware of what is available out there. And if they're not at the top level and ticking all the boxes, we'll say, with local authorities, the ETB don't really cover every place in rural Ireland, I see myself. And I think that, you know, accessibility for island people, I have 8 islands in my own constituency, West Cork, and it is very important. I'd like to see how they are able to access your grant scheme going forward. You might be able to elaborate a bit better on that, if you would, please.
Thank you, Deputy. Well, can I first of all say that, in fact, far from there being a bias against rural areas, Minister Heather Humphreys has, in fact, probably prioritised the rural areas, because every local authority gets the same amount of money. So whether you're Dublin, where perhaps €100,000 for Dublin City Council for their programme would not mean very much in the scheme of things, for Cork County, as you say, 100,000 means a significant amount, particularly spread amongst your community. Conor Nelligan, the Heritage Officer in Cork County Council, is the Creative Ireland coordinator in that area. As part of that, we have brought along, I think, the Cork County plan to show you. So Conor did a creative and cultural plan for Cork County with consultation, including of the island communities. So we're not hearing back what you're hearing. In fact, we're hearing that because it's somebody locally in that community who is responsible for dispersing that funding, that people feel it is quite accessible. They're not applying to Creative Ireland HQ. They're applying to Conor, who they would be dealing with already. So we might show you some of the county plans that were launched by Minister Owen Murphy a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you, Caroline. Okay, Senator Marie-Louise O'Donnell.
Thank you very much. First of all, can I just welcome Tanya Benotti as the new Director of Creative Ireland. And I say this because I know your work for the last 25 years. And I congratulate you on taking this job, getting this job, and I congratulate both departments for being perceptive enough to give it to you. Because I think you will make a very distinguished and distinctive role and career and contribution to the arts in all their forms and creativity, imaginative development in Ireland. So that's the first thing I'd like to say.
Thank you, Senator.
Just starting with the Department of Education, can I just ask you a question that you might linger on for a moment? Do you think that one of the things that you might think about in the Department of Education is giving 25 points to either music or visual art in the Leaving Certificate, like we do to mathematics, be it pass or fail? Well, we pass failure in mathematics now. We think that's a great idea because we were told it by banks and by universities. But in relation to the visual arts and music, which will be the core of much of what you're doing, do you think that making a case as the Department of Education for giving that the passion of 25 points would help in your development of creativity within your schools, be they primary or secondary? Because that is a kind of a link that comes right up from the time you were in middle school on. So would you answer that? I want you to go back to, are you the new Arts Council? This is where we get bogged down. I like the idea of lubricant, sort of, but it reminds me of Vaseline. So just go back to what you mean. Are you the new, because this is where we're getting caught. Where does the Arts Council begin and the Arts Council end? Where does the funding come in? Where do you get it? Where does your authority stop and end? And it's the same with the Department of Education. Are you doing a job the Department of Education really didn't do, or there's so much else to do that might have suffered a bit of slippage? So where do you begin and where do you end then? And when do you say you don't fund? You do, because you're funding Philip Doherty, the Cavan playwright, aren't you?
Yes, we're funding that through Creative Communities. So it's a
different aspect. I'm getting just bowed down in the Doric pillars, you know, and what is what and where is what. So maybe you just answer that. Maybe just put our minds at rest, and maybe somebody could write what you are in relation to. We know what you are individually, but we don't know what you are in relation to the Department of Arts, Culture, the Islands, the Wales, and we don't know what you are in relation to the Department of Education. And I agree. Yeah, but I agree that it's a wonderful linchpin. It's a wonderful bridge over the River Kwai. It's wonderful. But I just don't know where it begins and ends, and we're getting bogged down there and highly, maybe a bit conspiratorial. The next question I would like to ask is, what is the Department of Education's plans for the education of the teachers of this great creativity and arts, both the arts in education and arts? There's a lot of CP and professional development. Where's the money for that? And how is that happening? Where is that happening? How is that happening? And is it going to happen on an ongoing basis? And can people link into the teacher training colleges? How is that happening? Could you just lock that in for me? Because that's very important. It won't happen without that in a lot of ways. I mean, sometimes people can think they're creative and they're not at all. You know, what's the standard there? What are you doing there? Yes, that's probably it. Do you think that you could have put more attention into the deaf schools? That you might prioritise them a little more? I know they're there, and I know you want a fair play, but I wonder, you could maybe could you have initiated more stuff there, or they would have had a little bit easier access, and that's about all. But I welcome it. I absolutely welcome it. I think it's extraordinary because I saw it through the Heritage Weeks, you know, for years. And I think it's wrong to say it never happened before. It did happen before, Fergal, but sometimes we mightn't have recognised it. You know, people did it on their own. They got together and groups got together. And it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful to bring all conservation officers and heritage officers and musicologists and teachers. I think it's brilliant. And to do it at community level or ETB level or schools level, I think it's absolutely wonderful. A question of on the side. Does the department, since we have you here, have any comment to make on Galway 2020 and the fact that we're being drip-fed in the press and in papers, that there is a lot of changes and a lot of spaces and a lot of disquiet, artistic disquiet and noises off, to use the playwright's term? Would you make a comment on that since I have you here? So, they're my questions. Do you want to go first?
Thank you, Senator. If I might answer in relation to the questions you raised regarding education, the 25 bonus points issue is something that, a question we've been asked in a number of fora over the past number of months. We recently launched the foreign languages strategy last November, which led to calls for providing bonus points for some of our foreign languages. A week later, we launched the STEM education policy statement, which led to calls for bonus points for STEM subjects. And we've also heard in relation to calls for bonus points for subjects such as visual arts and music. I think we're going to have to look at this in the round. I think the decision in relation to maths arose from particularly negative findings of one of the international surveys a number of years ago, the PISA survey, and a number of actions were taken under the Literacy and Numeracy Strategy, and Minister Mary Coughlin at the time introduced the bonus points for maths. I think there are other ways, we'd say, to sort of incentivise take-up of subjects, but I don't think we're going down the bonus point road in relation to other subjects. I might come in just a little bit in relation to the question that you asked of Tanya about is Creative Ireland doing the job of the Department of Education and Schools. I made a point at the very start that the department and schools would already regard themselves as being creative. We see Creative Ireland as providing an opportunity to provide enhanced opportunities for creativity across arts, music, drama and culture. But I don't think there's any school that would come out and say Creative Ireland has sparked the creative pilot light in us, because a lot of schools are already creative. You talked about teacher education and CPD, and actually that's crucial, and it's good that you raised the question, Senator. Two of the actions in the creative youth pillar are specifically focused on CPD in primary and in post-primary schools. So the teacher-artist partnership action, which a pilot phase of it predated Creative Ireland, but it's being fast-tracked and embraced under Creative Ireland. This is whereby primary school teachers can undertake a course during the summer, which is run in the 21 education centres which are countrywide, and those schools are attended by teachers and by artist facilitators. And the teachers and the artists spend a week essentially identifying programmes that would help to enhance creativity in the school. So when the teachers go back to the school, they have an opportunity then to apply that learning that they got during the summer. And the programme is accompanied by a number of artist residencies, whereby the artist participating in the teacher-artist partnership programme would have a residency in the school for a term, and would work with the teachers and with the students to actually help to develop creativity in the school. But we're very conscious of the fact that the teachers are essentially the keys to success of very many of initiatives from the department, not only in the Creative Ireland space. So we're very keen to work closely with them. And the teacher-artist partnership has been quite successful after its initial phase. We had a full year of it last year and a full year this summer as well. And again, we're hoping to ramp that up over the course of the programme. At post-primary level, and I'll say here that the challenges as you move towards the Leaving Certificate are more difficult. Yeah.
Back to maths.
So we have a programme at the moment called Arts and Junior Cycle, which is essentially seeking to provide CPD to teachers to help them to sort of teach the junior cycle subjects in creative ways. So, for example, in relation to English, we have a programme called Speaking Shakespeare, which essentially seeks to take the words from the page and put them on the stage. And in a number of other subjects as well, in visual arts and in Gaeilge and in music, we have a number of other CPD programmes for teachers of junior cycle. Recalling also that teachers of junior cycle also teach senior cycle. So the provision of the CPD for them under the Arts and Junior Cycle initiative will also have impacts at senior cycle. But one of the challenges that we identify, and which we hope Creative Ireland will help us about, is how to actually work with the senior cycle schools to actually to sort of seek to embed creativity more, because the focus moves to sort of the exam system to a greater extent than at primary level. In relation to desk schools, Senator, the number of desk schools that are included in the programme initiatives are proportionate to the number of desk schools. So there's about 800 schools in the DESH programme, and the number of DESH schools created is more or less proportionate to those numbers. What we're finding when we go around the country is that a number of DESH schools seem to have creativity and artistic projects maybe out of proportion to their numbers, in that a lot of initiatives in DESH schools are in the artistic space. But certainly we're working closely with the DESH schools, their students and the teachers, to ensure that they benefit fully from the Creative Ireland experience. We'll talk later on about the whole issue of evaluation of the Creative Ireland programme and creative schools. And evaluation, and I give some credit to Tanya since she arrived. She's been banging the evaluation drum very, very strongly in relation to ensuring that for all of the 18 projects under Creative Youth, that evaluation is built in. Because we're in the pilot phase of the project, we want to ensure that mechanisms and metrics and indicators are in place to ensure that at the end of the pilot phase we're able to see what worked, what didn't work, what might work better, what activities might be able to be mainstreamed. So from that evaluation we may also get some findings in relation to how we can maybe sort of focus the initiatives in particular school types, special schools, DESH schools, mainstream schools. That's more or less it.
Just in relation to I suppose the greater point of the programmes, the authority, and where does that flow from? It's a government programme, so it was endorsed by government. So, and it's led by the minister. So it's not a separate organisation. It's a unit within the programme led by Tanya. Tanya leads a unit from within the department.
I know that.
And all that sanctioned. So I don't think we've added new authority. I don't think we're encroaching on anybody's authority. I don't think the Arts Council would say that their decision-making function has been impaired or changed or amended in any sense, except that we're working together very closely in this on the Creative Youth Programme, which is the Creative Schools project, which is very, very exciting. And I don't think there's 1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah, we're at 12 minutes now, so just if you have another opportunity.
Yeah, just before, I disagree with you vehemently, Mr. Moran, in relation to unless you actually give credence to the arts, at 9, 10, 11, which we haven't done for years, and then at 14, 15, and 16, people will not take it up. I mean, the idea of young people being able to choose, be it a language, be it a passion, for music or visual arts. I think that the department should be far more creative and imaginative in how they approach that. And they closed it down in a way, and they added to the point system when they just said, well, maths will get you 25 points. It doesn't really matter. If they had a choice themselves, many of them would choose from your intercert up, from the junior cycle up, possibly the arts subject. So I disagree with that. I disagree with that completely. Can I just it says here that this Creative Ireland programme is an all-government programme. Where do you see yourself, just very quickly, in relation to the Department of Agriculture, social welfare? Do you see that coming through, or the Department of Communications? Yeah. I mean, this is enormous, because I know the Department of Education are a beautiful fit here and a right fit and want to be the fit, but there are others around. I found this out in my own study on how we leave the planet and dying in Ireland, how it's affected by every department, not just the Department of Health. Right, yeah. So I would say the same about the arts, It
is much wider. I mean, the Department of Children isn't here today, the Department of Communications, as you rightly pointed out, isn't here today, the Department of Local Government isn't here today. The Department of Taoiseach will, convenes the all-of-government meetings from time to time, where all those departments are coming in. We work very closely with the Department of Social Protection in relation to the artists, the initiative in relation to artists and accessing the social welfare payments. Okay. So we do work across. We probably haven't reached into agriculture.
Yes, it's just a general question that there is obvious fits, but you're getting a lot of money for being an all-government programme, which is right, and that you'd have an influence on them, or how they do business, or how they communicate, or how things are presented to the public, and
I think that's a challenge, Senator. I think there are very few all-of-government initiatives. When I joined the programme, I asked, could you tell me the other all-of-government initiatives? And I was told that things like Healthy Ireland, which covers local authorities, libraries, health and everything else, but there aren't very many other programmes that are as ambitious as this one. Because of our work with creative communities, we will be working closely with rural and community development and housing and planning. Other departments less so, but that is the challenge with a small team, to really be effective, and that's why it's fantastic that Creative Ireland reports straight up to Martin Fraser, and there's a senior officials group that involves the Secretary Generals of all the government departments. So when needs arise that we need other government departments to help us, for example, next year we'll be doing a lot of initiatives in the area of mental health and the arts.
It's very important.
And in the area of successful ageing and creativity. So we will seek to work with other departments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Warfield.
Congratulations, Tanya, on your appointment, and welcome to the other guests to the committee. I think it's a constant theme here, as you alluded to, Senator, that we speculate about the form that this takes, or intends to take, and I think from what I've heard, not all of the time, but within the arts community, that there's concern and there's scepticism as well. And I just want to begin with the marketing and the advertorials. From 2009, Creative Ireland will have a budget of 7.15 million, or 9.15 million?
7.12 million in 2019.
Yeah. So what I respect, and I've gotten my head around this much, is that the role is different between Creative Ireland and our agencies and bodies. It's a significant amount of money that isn't going there. And in the context of a department that only has so much money, it's really, really important that that money is being spent in the right place. And I just think it's disappointing. So we don't have the figures to this point for 2018, but I have the 2017 figures from Freedom of Information. What happened?
We have the expenditure on page 21. Sorry, Senator, we have expenditure for 2018 on page, the allocation there, on page 21.
$6 million.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 million in 2018 and 7.12 million in 2019. I think, Senator, perhaps your concerns might relate to 2017, but certainly you can see that the citizen engagement budget has fallen by 80%.
So citizen engagement is the print.
The €250,000 mentioned here.
The online costs, digital costs, cost of a website, etc.
Yeah.
Is there social media advertising in 2018?
Essentially, no, Senator. We do some videos where we look at the beneficiaries in creative communities. With the Heritage Council, we did a film around heritage in schools. But no, we're not doing the level of media spend that we would have done in previous years. Well, I think that budget will reflect, you can see that in comparison to the details we gave the committee last year.
Yeah, Senator, the digital costs for this year all relate to our video content, as Tanya said, around the various initiatives like Crinún and Oak, the various local authority pieces. So all of that, and we will be publishing an end-of-year report for this year where we'll be able to allocate the various costs towards each of the videos, etc.
Culture Ireland was given about 100,000 last week. It wasn't announced on the budget day or the day after, I don't think. I think we waited until Friday to get the updated press release that contained an increase in Culture Ireland. And it's not a question for Tanya, but really for the Minister, you know, if Culture Ireland's getting a 100,000 increase and we're spending 250,000 on advertorials and sending 150,000 on video or digital costs, the promoted tweets going out last week commending the increased investment in culture heritage in the Gaeltacht from the Creative Ireland account. That pictures Minister Josepha Madigan in the Dáil. I just wonder, is the balance, while the roles are different, I respect that, is the balance, have we got our priorities right?
Yeah, look, Senator, just maybe to speak on the wider picture, the focus is absolutely to try and get significant additional monies into the sector. Earlier this year, we launched a €1.2 billion capital development plan for the sector over next 10 years. The Taoiseach speaking at that, there's no point building these buildings unless they become truly national institutions that are able to engage, and that's a big resourcing challenge ahead of us. We're starting that journey in terms of the increasing the current allocations. So the Arts Council got almost an additional €7 million this year. That's a significant additional boost. Whereas, as you rightly point out, the Creative Ireland is up €1 million and doing really good work, like we discussed with Eamon and Tanya there in the schools. In relation to the Culture Ireland budget, it should be noted that last year there was a particular high-level campaign in GB in Britain, the GB18 campaign. And if you trace back over the years of the Culture Ireland expenditure, I know it's lower than it was back in 2008, no more than many other areas around government, but it spikes in particular years. So there was a particular Imagine Ireland campaign in America in 2011 where it got additional funding, that it dropped. In 2013, there was the Irish presidency of the EU, and Culture Ireland got a large budget there, then it dropped. 2016, the Ireland 2016 programme had a big international focus. Again, Culture Ireland expenditure peaked and then dropped. And then last year we had a campaign in GB. This year we don't have 2019 there isn't a particular campaign. So in effect, Culture Ireland held on to all the additional money they got last year, that extra €500,000 got last year, and an additional 100,000. And that will begin the journey in terms of the Culture Ireland part of the global Ireland 2025 campaign. So I suppose that has to be that's the context in which you have to see that.
I'm just uncomfortable with the idea that we've seen it with the Strategic Comms Unit, where government policy is spun back at taxpayers at their own expense, and then also, in this case, at the expense of artists who could have benefited from more from. I commend the increases across the board. It's really, the budget was strong. but on the Culture Ireland front, for example, say that, you know, certainly money spent in previous years on ads was outrageous, and I think that should be suspended. Is there a social media policy? Is there a content plan put out for the Creative Ireland accounts and all of that? How does that work?
So is there
a social media policy for all of the accounts, for the Twitter account? Are there content plans? And
yeah, maybe I don't. Tanya, don't want to speak?
Yeah, there are content plans for our Facebook and Twitter. Is that the question? Yeah, yes, there are. As there is for our website.
I think I think in the modern age, especially particularly young people who don't read newspapers anymore, you have to have videos, you have to have a presence online, and it's not about us, it's not about Creative Ireland programme or the team. It's actually about getting people interested, becoming engaged. That they might actually go out and watch a show, go out and take part in a local creative activity, promote a local artists, bring their work, highlight their work to the local and national theatre.
I would also add, Senator, that it's at the request of the partnerships that we have with the local authorities that they feel that a lot of the work that's being done at local authority level wouldn't be quite recognised as perhaps as valued, perhaps as some of the work that would have happened at national level as funded by the Arts Council. So if you look on our YouTube channel at the 8 videos we've done this year, the bulk of those are people under the creative communities. They are artists or they're young people. They're people who've benefited under Pillar 2 of creative communities. Or we did one to celebrate Culture Night where a poet, Stephen James Smith, who had worked with one of our local authorities, wrote a poem for Culture Night and performed it. So most of the videos are, frankly, at the request of partners like the Heritage Council. They have a Super Heritage in Schools programme. They wouldn't traditionally have had the funds to shoot a film to promote it, but under Minister Madigan, the Heritage in Schools programme, an additional 650 schools will get that next year, and they need to promote that. So with Creative Ireland, we were able to step in and go, we can help you by making a short film around what heritage in schools looks like and why more schools should avail of it. I don't think I think that's a legitimate use of the programme.
Last week there were promoted tweets around the budget. One tweet: government makes good on its commitment to invest in creativity, arts, culture under the Creative Ireland programme, with welcome increases to our colleagues, XYZ. Fine Gael would be delighted with that. I mean,
why not? Are we not to tell people?
No, just one voice.
I'm told, Fergal, in your introduction, you say, and I quote, "It's not advertising government."
That's I think that's valid. Yeah, no, we're not here to advertise government. I think there was a sense that it was a good day in terms of delivering for the artists last week.
Right. Cheers.
Senator Hopkins, please.
Thank you, and thank you all for your presentations today. Just 2 questions. One, and there has been a lot of discussion around, I suppose, schools' involvement. My first question is in relation to, obviously, the Creative Ireland programme is a programme running from 2017 to 2022. And I think all of us are very encouraged by the fact that we're trying to encourage young people. So obviously participation within schools is very positive. And you have mentioned about the pilot scheme in which there are 150 schools participating, and the access to extra resources that they will have. I'm quite encouraged in terms of the questions that were asked in relation to evaluation. And I suppose where I'm coming to in this is that this is a short-term programme. How do we see, I suppose, the evaluation being used to ensure that everybody gets access in terms of inspiring their creativity? And that is in conjunction, obviously, with the Department of Education and Skills and the Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. I'm just concerned that, I mean, a pilot project is good, but we need to have a longer term vision in terms of arts, within schools on a more tangible basis than currently is? That's my first question. The second question is in relation to the budget for 2018. And I say this knowing just within Roscommon County Council, I know that a lot of work has happened in terms of Creative Ireland, particularly working with libraries, particularly encouraging, there's a lot more communication, there's a lot more participation within the Arts Centre in Roscommon, which is very positive. But, and it goes back to the word evaluation, 2 million has been given to local authorities in 2018 budget. How is that being evaluated? How do we know that? And I know they're, how would I say, they're bedded down within strategies, but strategies are only, you know, strategies are strategies. They don't give us evidence that, I suppose, work has taken place to support people across a particular county or local authority area. So how is that 2 million being evaluated to ensure that, you know, there is value for money, and that and I don't even mean it in that context, but it reaches out to as wide a group of people as possible within a particular local authority?
Well, I might ask Eamon to address the evaluation of the schools and the rollout, but I would draw your attention to page 9 and 10 of the submission we gave you, which talks about evaluation for all of Creative Youth, because I think what we've been doing this year is really putting flesh on the bones of the Creative Ireland programme. There are 3 different ways in which we measure, evaluate, track what's happening at creative communities level. For the first time, apparently, in the history of local authorities, we bring the Creative Ireland coordinator and all the culture teams together 4 to 5 times a year. That's the first thing. So people are brought together to share good practice. Somebody tried something in this local authority, how did that work, etc., etc. So there's the human side of things. There's also a specific online portal, and again, I would draw your attention, this is the reason why we gave such a detailed document to the committee. You can see in Appendix 1 that how we track the Creative Communities funds is there. We can track it geographically, by audience numbers, by art form, by pillar. In fact, I would argue that there's more detailed evaluation of this than many other programmes. So yes, there's an evaluation, and no money can be drawn down unless the invoices are there from the local authority. Then, in addition to which, we fan out as a team to the local authorities. We go and meet with the city and county manager. We meet with the culture and creative teams. Now, obviously, I'm only in post 4 months, so I haven't managed to get to every local authority yet. So there's the face-to-face meetings, the online portal, the measurement, and the financial measurement, and then the going out into each local authority to meet the teams and share good practice. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Senator, just in relation to what's going to happen sort of after Creative Ireland, and how do we ensure that all schools, or as many schools as possible, can benefit from the lessons from Creative Ireland. We are conscious of the fact, all right, that the Creative Schools Phase 1 pilot is only 150 schools. The aim is to double that number of schools, and then as the project moves on, to further increase those numbers. We know, though, that by increasing the numbers by 150 schools a year won't get to the 4,000 schools. So, and it never was the intention. The idea is that we would, when we evaluate how successful or otherwise the Creative Schools project is, that action, we would identify successful elements of that programme with a view to allowing schools in general to mainstream those activities. Like, there would be a lot of learning from the initial actions, and then we would envisage that they would be packaged then after Creative Ireland into a programme that more schools could readily access, that wouldn't need, we'd say, the sort of the scaffolding and structures that have been put in place by Creative Ireland, which are necessary to facilitate this trialling of a number of initiatives. There's also about 74 schools taking part in the Creative Clusters programme as well, so we're at about 225, 230 schools. We're conscious of the fact that we don't want to wait until Creative Ireland is over to sort of spread the word to other schools. So Tanya already mentioned about the sort of the portal set up under Creative Ireland. Under the Charter for Arts and Education, which was launched by the Minister for Arts and Education back in 2013, which predated Creative Ireland, there were a number of initiatives put in place or identified as worth pursuing to allow schools to sort of embrace and enhance arts and education. And some of those initiatives actually are finding form and substance in Creative Ireland. So, for example, the Creative Schools programme, the genesis for that was the Oireach programme that was proposed in the charter, which is arts-rich schools. So I wouldn't have any concern that at the end of Creative Ireland in 2022 or 2023 that everything will fall flat, in that the charter was already there. The Creative Ireland programme recently put in place an advisory group of experts across a number of departments and the arts fields in general and the creativity fields to actually advise the high-level steering group on creative youth as to how to give its view on how successful the implementation of its actions were, but also critically to look at whether Creative Ireland and Creative Youth after 2022. And they had a very successful meeting last week that Tanya was at, where they looked at the issue of sort of defining creativity. So one of the aims of the whole project is to ensure that it will have a life, we'll say, after the Creative Ireland programme itself.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, we're really thrilled that Dr. Ciarán Benson, who wrote the first report 40 years ago for the Arts Council about the arts in schools, is chairing that committee. We have people from the Inspectorate in the Department of Education, and I'm surprised to hear what you say, Senator, because we've actually heard quite the opposite from the Arts Council, that they say that since Creative Ireland has arrived, they've never had such close contact with the Department of Education in developing this initiative. And that's where I think the benefit of this is, that yes, we'll be gone in 5 years' time, but what the Department of Education will be able to take forward is, that the lifetime of the programme is to 2022 at the moment, and that's what
I see Mr. Warren there, steam coming out of him there. At that remark.
Sorry, continue, sorry, yeah.
No, just to say that, so yes, we're looking at lots of things that we're trialling at the moment to go, what could we put out to 4,000 schools? We're very conscious of the government commitment that this is every child, and really the only way to reach every child is through 4,000 schools. We're not going to be able to start with 4,000 schools at the start, but I would say to you that to be working in 300 schools is light years away from what has happened heretofore before Creative Ireland arrived.
Listen, we would thank you all very much for coming in here today, and it's been very helpful for us. Obviously, there are questions and there's debates to be had overall at this, and there's policy decisions to be made. But we wish you luck in the work that you have in front of you, and we look forward to maybe having you in again at some stage. So, thank you very much. Yes.
Just to ask that maybe if you kept in communication with us, because that's one of the things that falls apart, you know, and you let us know maybe interesting projects that are happening that are being done through the auspice of Creative Ireland, through the schools or whatever, that we would visit. We would go and take part, you know, and go as an audience or go to see what the work you're doing. Because a lot of the time here it just becomes, you know, non-physical. You know, we're not there. So we would really appreciate that. I'm sure the chair would do.
Well, I think I can assure you, Senator, that
in areas outside Dublin,
in 2019 we will be drowning in initiatives and events, and we'll
we'd be
very
delighted
happy
to support some of them as an arts committee.
And we'd be thrilled to have you
and
there.
And many of the TDs would be thrilled if they were in their constituencies.
Yeah, well, I think what I would say is we really want that. I mean, it is an all-of-government programme, but to answer the Senator's question, it will only succeed if all political parties and none see a value to it. So we'd be very happy to invite you to that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate it. And we might put the committee on suspended for a number of minutes while our guests leave the room. We have a little bit of work to do just in private session.